Hello. Hi, it's Diva Carla. I'm here just for a few minutes to speak with you in our group here about how can you tell, how can you learn who you really are. It's a question that bubbled up from the unconditional self-love class that I taught last week. And if you haven't listened to that, go find it. It's attached up in, it's marked as an announcement at the top of the group wall. So give yourself a couple of 45-minute segments or an hour and a half and a pot of tea to dive into that material and really listen and really feel and start journaling your way into unconditional self-love. And it's not surprising that the conversation about unconditional self-love brings up the question of who am I really and how do I know who I really am? And I have been thinking hard about this question for several days. And I've been sitting in circle with women here in my home in the red tent. And the question has been in the background as we talked in circle. And I'm reading the book. I'm reading If Women Rose Rooted, and Sharon Blackie talks about that journey. How did she find out who she really is? She wrote a whole book about her seeking and her path. And of course, we are all always on the path. We do not find out, as in, now I have arrived. It occurs to me that that question is very much a first world question. It's a question of the industrialized Western world, because what I have learned about being who I really am, I began to learn through Indigenous people, Native American teachers and African spirituality teachers who were willing to share what they know, what they learned about being connected to the earth, about being part of nature, embedded in nature. And what they learned about initiation, because it is let me not get ahead of myself. I do not intend to romanticize Indigenous people who live in intimate relation to the earth. But what I have understood from the teachings that they have shared with me is that it is the intention of the community to help each person born know who they really are. And so they have ritual and spirituality, a connection to the earth, a connection to the ancestors. And yes, there is tribalism. There is a sense of I belong here with this group that we lack in the West. The West invented the nuclear family, in which there is a woman at home and a man out doing the bidding of the patriarchy, the corporation, and then children who are growing up disconnected, and for the past 3 generations at least, disconnected even from grandparents, relatives who are living far away from the people in their world. Now, I am a product of that. My way of dealing with finding out who I really am, part of it meant running away to the big city and never looking back. When it came time to leave the city, I did not go back where I came from. I couldn't, didn't want to. I was not there. Who I really am was not there. I was talking to someone today about, my mother said, well, you always were weird. Yeah, I was the weird one. I didn't belong. I wanted to belong. I did my best to belong, but I didn't belong. And the way that I found belonging was to run very far. That was the first step. Leaving home. This is the first step of initiation. And then I kept trying to find my way back home. What do I know? How can I fit in? What was I raised to do? Well, I was raised to have babies and go to church and bake and make quilts and sew and can. But I lived in New York City by that time. The baby having I could do, but it wasn't going to be the same. When I tried to live in the city the way I was brought up to live, there were not enough anchor points, and that wasn't really who I am. It's not who I was meant to be. Now, yes, I'm earthy. I cook, I bake. Now I grow food and preserve it. I get closer to my roots in some ways, but none of that is who I really am. Those are decisions I make according to my values about how to live, which is a part. It's a starting place for some of us to find out who we really are. So what do I learn from my indigenous teachers? I learn that it is the work of the village, the elders, the spiritual teachers, the shamans, whatever they call them, the different community members and extended family members to help each person find out who they really are. Because who you are is your gifts and talents and your purpose and your desire. And your work is to cultivate those, to find them, to seek them and find them, because they don't show up on a silver platter. You don't plug into the computer and there they are. You have to go on a journey to find them. And you have to go into the dark places to find them. And that's how you begin the journey of finding who you really are. You go on the quest. And then you find those gifts and you bring them back to serve the community. So who you really are is something that's inside of you. It is your inner knowing, your gifts, I am. I know who I am. And it is what you bring back to the community. One of the things that was triggering of this question was realizing that we women we don't have an I am inside of us. We get really caught up and we are socialized and expect of ourselves that we shall meet the needs of all the people in our lives. We are servants. We are here for the pleasure of men. We are here for the bearing and nurturing of children. We have now added military service and corporate service and going out and working in the world as part of who we are. And then there is the family that we were born into and what they expect of us, caring for aging parents, taking care of and being available to our siblings and extended family and our friends. It's endless. Be here for me. And we play right into that because we're in codependent relationships with the people in our lives. And there is no space. Who am I? Who am I? Why is depression so prevalent among women and men in this world? Because we do not know, who am I? And to be separated from yourself, to be isolated from your own self and the true relationship to the community, being valued as yourself in the community, that is a living death. It is the root of depression. It is the root of addiction. It is the root of despair. And so what do we do about it? Well, what I have done about it, what I did about it, was I started a long journey of initiation. And it took many steps. It took many forms. It started, as I said, at the age of 21. I ran away. I ran away from the South. I ran away before that. There was a certain path I was kind of expected that I thought I would take, and I took a little bit of a veer off of that path. Instead of going to the University of Tennessee, I went up to Kentucky and went to school in Kentucky. Why? Why did I do that? Because I'd had sex with my boyfriend and I thought I had to marry him. And that's where he went to school. That lasted 4 months. We broke up because I have a soul that's looking out for me. However, the belief that I was a sinner and a bad person and an evil person, especially after I broke up with him, it continued. It did not go away. So what I found out, I'm seeing your comments, Cindy, and I'm just got to stay. I got to stay with this because I have to go out soon. So yeah, I started there. I started breaking rules, and then I paid the consequences of them because I didn't have another way to be. I didn't have any examples. I had no one saying, this is how you are a woman. I was actually, as many of us are, women who came of age in the late 60s, early 70s, and since then, we came of age with this idea of we will get married and have children, and our husband would take care of us and we would live happily ever after. And then at the same time, all of a sudden, oh, well, you're expected to go to college and get an education. And in my case, I'm first generation to go to college. It was so that I would get a suitable husband, a rich husband, and not marry a poor dirt farmer like my mother did. And I totally didn't get that was the program. So instead, I run away. I studied nothing practical. I studied art. I avoided all practical studies. I studied art and world religions, attempting to get away from the religion I was born to, and to find a new way to be me. I was looking for me. I knew that I could not live in this world as a sinner, and I was trying to find a model. You know, is it the feminist professors who showed me how to be a free woman in the 1970s and go for a career and have free love and act like a man in so many ways? Or was it, the goddesses of Hinduism? Well, none of that was in the right container. So I had to run further. I ran away to New York City. And that was so dark. I was so alone. I had a couple of friends there, and yet, they could not meet all my needs. They could not heal me. They couldn't, they could have dinner with me and order a pizza with me, go to a movie with me, but they could not be my initiator. And so I dropped in much more deeply. I was in a freefall. Not that I knew it then. I thought I had my shit together. How you can think you have the shit together when you're just kind of dropping all of the identity, the shreds of identity that you thought you had. I don't know. But where I landed with doing what I knew how to do. Get married, have babies. Actually, because I was in rebellion, in the midst of a self-initiation, I had my babies and then I got married. Why? Because having babies outside of marriage, I was not really, brave enough to thumb my nose at the rules of my upbringing. And I thought, well, maybe if I get married, I will not feel so desperately alone and in Freefall, in darkness. And it went on for years and years and years. I went on for years. And all the time that I lived in New York, the closest I got to getting a clue of who I am was nursing my babies. Yes, being a mother was, when a woman becomes a mother, that becomes a huge part of who she is. And and yet what is not right is doing it in isolation, which is how I did my mothering. I was in the nuclear family, and my family was far away, which is right where I wanted them. But I did not have a community to help me raise the children. And it's too much for one man, one woman, or a single individual to do alone. So all of that gets put on hold. Who I am mother, I am mommy. And somewhere in the middle of it, I rediscovered art. And I began to feel, yes, I am an artist. I was born to do this. And I had that epiphany, that moment of clarity of, I am born to do this. But there was no support for it. I didn't know how to be in the world with it. I just did it secretly. I made paintings, I made art, I worked on my skills while going off and doing things that I never ever wanted to do, like get a master's in special education and teach school, because I was off track. I didn't know who I was, so I just kept trying things. And then finally I moved to Maine, and that's another story, but that's when I had an extended stay in Maine because I had a son. We were on vacation, and I had a son who was taken to the hospital near death, and it turns out he had diabetes. We had more dark nights of the soul. We had 1993, 1991, which was death, stealing, broken arm, my broken arm, both the children getting sick, husband losing his job. We had the year from hell. Anno horribilis, my partner now calls it. Your soul will take you as far down as you need to go. And so, step by step, my soul guided me where I needed to be to find out who I really am. And I needed to be in Maine. I needed to get back to the land. I needed to find a new spiritual path. And step by step, in the right order, Spirit took me there. I needed to get out of my marriage. I needed to break every goddamn rule in my entire life. And things needed to get even worse, because even once I was in initiation, that was the beginning of the descent. It got worse. I wasn't alone. I was in a container. I was rebuilding a life after divorce and after all of these changes, after the children grew up. I had to fail. I had to make a lot more mistakes. I had to go through humiliation. I had to confront shame on a daily basis. I had years and years, a lifetime, a half century by then, of shit that had been planted there by religion in Sunday school, that had been planted there by my loving and well-intentioned mother who was just trying to obey the rules when I was born, before I even knew. When I was just, a being sitting on Mama's lap, when there was no I yet. The seeds of my descent were already planted. And I had to dredge through all that, and it goes on to this day. And one of the most extraordinary things that I'm learning is that failure is my superpower. That all of the mistakes, all of the failures, all of the things that I constructed a bubble of shame around and said, oh, I don't even want to go there, those are the key to who I am. And I haven't done a step of it alone. When I reach the point where I will die if I do not heal this, the teachers appeared, Native American, African. The initiatrix, the priestess, appeared and invited me in, and my soul said, yes, go there. And when I sat in the sweat lodge, my soul said, yeah, this is where you belong. And yeah, I know I'm a white girl, but I also know my truth. I would not be here alive had it not been for that African American woman and that Native American man and the people that I met through them, and ceremonies and teachings and space holding. I wouldn't be here. And there have been so many, in addition to them, coaches and teachers and healers and space holders for initiation, and I am still in it. I will never be over it because their Cosmic Crone is calling me forward yet again into a being that I don't know how to be yet, and yet she has prepared for me. She has been waiting for me. And you know what she tells me? She tells me, hold this space for other women. This is work that you need. This is the work of initiation. You intentionally must open the gate and step through. And in the modern world, that requires the investment. It means make a commitment. Apply your resources, financial, time, emotional, spiritual, mental. In ancient times, it would have been the deer and the buffalo and the blankets and the tobacco and service, years of servitude to the initiator. It would have been all kinds of currencies. Now it is decisions and money, investment, and more than anything else, your commitment of walking through the door. This is how you find her. This is how you find you. Because this work of descent and ascent, of going into the wound and into the failure and into the mistakes and into the dregs that you have buried, you cannot do this alone. Clarissa Pinkola Estes says, you cannot do it alone. You need guides. Sharon Blackie says, you cannot do it alone. You must have guides. And I know I could not have done it alone. I must have a guide. A sequence of guides, because women are cyclical. We spiral down, we spiral back up, and then we find ourselves going down again and coming up again. We are always changing at every stage. And there are those who would say, your soul initiates you. Initiate yourself. And I say, that doesn't work. That is, let me rephrase that. That's dangerous. Michael Meade talks a lot about initiation, and even Sharon Blackie in the chapter I just read in If Women Rose Rooted talks about the same thing. The danger is on the descent that you may not come back. Sometimes we fall so deeply in love with our pain, so deeply in love with this question, who am I, that we cannot get out. And so we need the priestess, the priest, the community, the elders, to be standing there, to know when to pull us back, to light the way, because the ascent, for every step down, you take a step up. This is the work. This is how you answer the question, who am I? How can I find out who I really am? I wish the answer were easier. It's not. My gray hair, my heartache, my failures, my wrinkles, they're a testament. It's not easy. It's the only journey worth making, and it is worth it. It's time for me to go. I'll be back later. Bye-bye.